Hey, it's Patrick from J&P Cycles, and let's take a look at the inner workings of a CV carburetor. Now, a CV carburetor is kind of the longest running carb on Harley Davidson models for quite some time until everything went to fuel injection. Before that, we had a couple other versions of it. The CV is probably the most common. CV stands for constant velocity. And a lot of people take CV carburetors off for upgraded carbs like Micunis or SNSs, and those all work great. But the CV carb is a very, very good carb in its own right, has a couple of things that really work for it. Now you can upgrade them, and that's kind of why we're gonna show you the basics of this. If you ever were to do motor work to your engine, you need to jet it, or if you're just troubleshooting problems with the way your bike is running, this is gonna be a good base knowledge for you to know what parts are where and what they do. Let's get into the CV a little bit. We're gonna start on the outside, and we're gonna work our way to the inside. A CV is a spigot style carb, meaning this is the manifold side. It just presses right into the manifold. On the other side here, you can see where the air cleaner goes. This is our fuel line still on that goes from the petcock, and this is what puts fuel into the float bowl. And you can see on a lot of these CVs, this is plastic. These will or can break, and there is an upgrade available that we sell, a nice brass one that is a lot more durable than this. This one's in good shape, so we're gonna leave it for now, but that is a part you can upgrade. Right here, you can see the slide and the needle, which we'll get into more in a little bit. Right here, this is part of the accelerator pump, where when you hit the gas, the accelerator pump gives you a little extra squirt. And again, as we get to the inside, we'll talk more about that. But you can see here, this is how the accelerator pump kind of gets activated. So on a CV carb, your throttle cables come down here. As you twist on your throttle, this butterfly gets opened. It presses down on the accelerator pump, which then gives you a little squirt of gas to kind of transition from like a low speed to like quick acceleration. It throws a little fuel in there and helps that acceleration kind of sling its way along as we transition from the pilot jet to the main jet, which we'll also get to here in a minute. Choke knob, pull on the choke. Basically what that does, opens up a fuel circuit, squirts a little extra fuel in there, or allows a little extra fuel to be added on startup, so it makes cold startups easier. That's pretty much all this choke does. When you pull on that, it opens up a fuel circuit to dump a little more fuel in there. So you can see our Phillips screws here. A lot of times these will get stripped out. A nice upgrade is to replace these with Allen screws, which are easier to use and harder to strip out. This little screw here, this is just to drain the float bowl. For some reason you're gonna take this apart and you don't want fuel to go all over the place, you can drain the float bowl here. This is actually your overflow. And instead of dumping all that fuel into the carb, it's going to just drain it out through the overflow here. But for now, let's take our float bowl off and we'll look at the bottom side of this carb. Okay, so our float bowl's off. This is where it fills up with fuel, and that's where the carb draws fuel from to run the bike. As this float level moves down, there's a little valve in here, and as it moves down, the valve opens up. You can see the fuel inlet here. There's a passage over here, and as this moves down, it opens this up and then fills this float bowl with fuel to keep the bike running. Here's your accelerator pump. We'll open this up. Okay, so there's a diaphragm in here. There's a little bit of fuel that stays in here, and as that pin comes down and presses on that, it squirts out this little spigot right here, the little bitty hole right there. It squirts right into your carburetor right there where you're gonna need it. And you can see ours is a little bit corroded. This is something we'll replace on this. This is a good little thing to keep an eye on. If your bike is stumbling on acceleration or not accelerating smooth, this is a good place to look right here is your accelerator pump. There's a little bitty O-ring here that can be replaced too. This spring comes in and out, but if you're having problems on acceleration like a hit or a stumble or something, might not be a bad thing to check out your accelerator pump. On some CVs, this is blocked off right here. There's a little casting that can be drilled out to access this air fuel screw right here. This regulates the fuel at basically idle and at low speed. And if you screw this in, you'll start to choke off that fuel. If you back it back out, you'll add fuel to it. Not only does this regulate that kind of low speed air fuel, but again, when you crack the throttle on your bike, the transition from the pilot jet, which is down in here, which we'll take out, to the main jet is kind of controlled. This is on the same circuit as the pilot jet. So a constant velocity carb uses that quote unquote constant velocity to draw air and fuel through there, and then it's regulated by this air fuel screw. So the pilot jet or the low speed jet is down in here. Little flat bladed screwdriver. You want these in here snug, but you gotta be careful with these. They are a little soft. The sizes are written on the face of them. You might have to have glasses or get real close or something, but this is your pilot jet or low speed jet. Right here we have the main jet. And the main jet's a little more complex than just the biggest hole for the carburetor. In it actually rides the needle. That needle rides up and down in there, and the needle is tapered. So that tapered needle actually controls the fuel as you roll on and off the throttle. Let's take off the top, and then I can show you that a little better. If you have this little cable tower like this, you're gonna have to take loose this screw here. Oh, and while we're here, this is, if you want to change the idle on your bike, this is how this works. It's really, really simple. As you dial this in, it's quite simply going to roll onto the throttle just a tiny bit. That's going to increase your idle. You back that screw off, it's basically going to take a little throttle off. I don't like sliding the cap out from underneath of it because the diaphragm in there is actually kind of sensitive. You don't want to tear that diaphragm or even put a pinhole in it because it's going to not operate correctly. It's not going to have the same kind of suction on it to operate, to slide the slide up and down. So you're not gonna have a good running bike. Again, these top screws, you can replace these with Allens, which is what I prefer to do, just to get them in and out a little easier. So here's the spring. We'll get to that in a second. This is your top cap. This one's been replaced with the hot rod one. A lot of times in the factory, there's just black plastic. I'm gonna very carefully pull this diaphragm and slide out of here. So in effect, what is happening is the needle goes down into this opening right here, and the needle has a taper on it. So that taper kind of controls the fuel spray coming up. And as you raise the needle up out of the jet, it goes from fatter to narrower and more fuel comes out. This has a stock setup in it. One of the upgrades you can do is get a needle that has grooves and a clip on it. And one more way to tune the bike is to raise the needle up and down in there by adjusting the clip on the needle. So let's get back to the carb setup here. You roll on the throttle, it opens this butterfly, it activates another circuit, and that circuit draws air and causes this diaphragm to pull that slide up. And when the slide opens and the butterfly opens, more air comes in, more fuel comes in, and that's where you get the acceleration. So going back to this here, another upgrade is something like DynoJet's Thunder Slide Kit. Comes with a lot of the stuff I've already talked about, but it also comes with a plastic slide. The plastic slide is gonna be lighter and it'll give you a little bit quicker acceleration. But this is the diaphragm I was talking about earlier. You don't wanna have any punctures or tears in that. Like I said, it operates off that vacuum, and if that vacuum is pulling on this diaphragm and there's a hole or something in it, it's not gonna pull as much as it needs to. It's not gonna have that vacuum effect and pull that slide up as quickly as you need to. So now that I have my carb here in a million pieces, I'm actually gonna take this opportunity to do some of those upgrades that we talked about earlier with the screws, so on and so forth. We're actually gonna make a jetting change in ours. And a CV carburetor is a really good carb. Like I said, a lot of people jettison them for something like a Mikuni or an SNS. The CV carb has a lot of advantages, and you can actually make them a nice performance carburetor. One of the nice things about a CV is it's a really smooth riding carburetor because of the constant velocity vacuum effect. It doesn't activate directly off the throttle cable like a Mikuni, and one of the bad things is it won't react quite as quickly, but it's a much smoother ride. Very smooth carburetor. CVs are underrated. Pretty cheap modifications for these to match whatever you're doing to your motorcycle. All around a good carb. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to drop us a comment. Go work on those motorcycles.